Our second debate is on the mathematical preparation of future teachers. And we've invited 4 university faculty members to share their views. We all understand that so often teachers make the critical difference to our students' learning experience, but at the same time, they're challenged every single day by the enormous diversity and potential of the student body. How are we to prepare our teacher candidates for this experience? Our debater will start their opening statement in a minute. I'm going to briefly introduce our debaters. Shannon Ezzat is an associate professor of mathematics at Cape Breton University. He earned a bachelor's in education and a PhD in mathematics from the University of Canterbury. Prior to joining CBU, he spent 5 years at the University of Winnipeg teaching mathematical content to pre-service teachers. His academic interests include the representation theory of infinite groups and the development of logical reasoning in undergrad students and pre-service teachers. Welcome, Shannon. Jennifer Holm is an associate professor of mathematics education at Wilfrid Laurier University. She works with primary, junior, intermediate, pre-service teachers on developing their understandings of mathematics for teaching. Her research examines the knowledge that teacher candidates bring to an education program and how to develop understandings that support good teaching in mathematics method course. Welcome, Jennifer. Jean-Francois is a professor of mathematics education in the math department at UQAM. His work focuses on mathematical activity from an epistemological perspective and deconstructive research writing within the field. His work also includes the use of technology in elementary and secondary math education. He's a co-PI on a collaborative research project involving teacher trainers, pedagogical consultants, and novice teachers aimed at better understanding and articulating the relationship between pre-service and in-service teacher education. Welcome, Jean-Francois. Christine Suurtamm is a professor emeritus of mathematics education at University of Ottawa, where she also served terms as director of teacher education and vice dean research. She began her career as a secondary math teacher and department head. Her research focuses on the complexity of mathematics teachers' classroom practice, particularly formative assessment practices as opportunities to attend students' mathematical thinking. Welcome, Chris. Now, Shannon will kick off the debate with your opening statement. Over to you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Kitty. And thanks all of you for joining us here. In the spirit of debate, I'm going to take the 4 position on this, and our topic is when math content knowledge is secured, pedagogy follows. And again, this is just in the spirit of debate. I am going with 2 axioms here that to start off with. One is that mathematical thinking is a good thing for people to have, and that mathematicians are experts in mathematical thinking, and that we want more people being able to think mathematically in the world. And the more we can have that, the better society will be. So my background, right now I'm at Cape Breton University. I don't do a lot of teaching for future teachers, a little bit, but not too much. But in my previous position at the University of Winnipeg, I taught math content for elementary school teachers dozens of times. So that's where my opinions are informed from. So I'm going to make 4 points roughly about this. And they all come from the ethos that once students take these content courses, I want them to go to the methods courses and be very confident and comfortable so they can spend all of their time learning with methods experts how to teach mathematics in an effective way in their classroom. So my first point is that good content requires fluency in mathematics and the material being taught. And that comes from focus on the mathematical material in a classroom so that they can focus just on that topic without switching back and forth between content and pedagogy. It's a focus on the content itself. And it's really hard in methods courses to really develop pedagogy and critique pedagogy if you're not an expert in the topic that you're talking about the pedagogy of. It's really important to fully understand the topics that you are indeed talking about the pedagogy of. We had some good examples in the previous day for those of you who were here, talking about, for example, that diagram there, for example, which I'll point to again. Understanding integration from a level of an expert allows people to really get at the details of the mathematics in that diagram and in that process. The second thing I want to talk about is mathematical confidence. Deep knowledge helps students secure mathematical confidence. In pedagogy and in the classroom, teachers who have mathematical content fluency and mathematical confidence are more likely to take some pedagogical risks and try activities that they haven't tried before, or a little bit different than what they've experienced. Research does show that if teachers are not confident in the mathematics they're teaching, they fall back on methods that they've been taught. And usually methods that they've been taught are more kind of, we'll call them rote methods, which are a little different than the methods that are currently taught in mathematical education courses. And it allows teachers to develop rich and open-ended tasks and be comfortable helping students when they do something a little bit different than what's kind of quote unquote expected. The more knowledge you have, the more you can deal with these little deviations that students have, and you can use these deviations to help students learn in whatever direction that they're going in. The other thing is there's core ideas in mathematics, and I focus on logical reasoning, so that's the way I'm thinking of it, where it's incredibly important to have a foundational knowledge in mathematical reasoning in order to think about the mathematics and the mathematical material in a sophisticated and accurate way. And I think everybody knows that it's not inherent. It's not an inherent way of thinking for many people. People need practice. In fact, research shows that it takes a couple of classes in order to get people comfortable thinking with mathematical reasoning. So it's something to focus on. And my fourth point is a practical point. I would like methods teachers to focus wholly on methods. They are the methods experts. I have a bachelor's in education. I could teach some bit of methods, but I wouldn't be super comfortable, but I would consider myself more a content expert. And it allows both the method experts and the content experts to focus on their strengths, which I think will help students be the best teachers that they can.
The teacher and me needed slides so you could see while I talked. I'm sorry. I can come do that. Oh, let me grab my notes because I don't want to stand here. All right, so we've got a remote. Of course it doesn't work. Yeah, I'm okay. I can do that. Wouldn't be the first time. I'm just going to move over here to talk. Thank you for opening this up. And based on yesterday's conversation, I'm going to introduce myself, thanks to Egan getting me thinking about how do I introduce myself. But I would call myself a mathematics teacher educator, and I've been working in the field of education for 25 years now. So I'm going to speak from that experience in talking about this. And I'm going to say that we share almost every single point except for one. And that was a very important, it's a very, very important one in my conversation. But I am taking the against statement, and I'm going to say that when I saw the poll, I actually couldn't vote for any of those three things. I think there's a fourth, and that's what I'm going to talk about today, is I think there's another idea. So my conversation or my concern with that statement is the word content. And the reason for that is content knowledge is what students who are taking math classes need. So I'm going to use this example of 28 times 12 because it's a fairly easy example to kind of illustrate the point. I want my students, my math students, to answer this question, hopefully in the most efficient way possible. But this isn't what I need my teachers to know. Why is a focus on solely content, so that content knowledge, problematic? A large majority of elementary school teachers, we've talked about this at Fields for years, they're terrified of mathematics. They have fears in it. Putting them in another math course, my research has showed me some of them avoid careers because they have to take a math course. So giving them a math course and saying you need that to be a teacher, some of them are going to choose not to be teachers for that and could exacerbate the issues that they're having with their confidence. This focuses on content knowledge is going to leave them to have to learn the math for teaching on their own. And if we're talking about people who already have a weak understanding, a very inflexible understanding, that's problematic. And then a focus on content could reiterate pedagogy that is not conducive to all learners due to that inflexibility and understanding. So exactly what Shannon pointed out in his conversation. And then many individuals struggle with a strong content knowledge actually are the most inflexible thinkers because it's hard. So think about when you learned to read. You probably can't remember all the steps it took. So thinking about people who have a really strong content knowledge, sometimes they can't think about where learners are coming from, where they're struggling with, and they struggle to think about how to decompose something that is completely ingrained in them. So what I'm advocating for is that we need to focus on mathematics knowledge for teaching. So this is a content knowledge of the curriculum, looking at understandings and contextions, and an understanding of the progression of mathematics. And here's some examples of all of the things that I would want my teachers to know about 28 times 12. And there's many, many, many more things. So mathematics knowledge for teaching is mathematics. It is a very specific type of knowledge, and it's what we need our teachers to have. So I'm going to turn the floor to experts who have many more years of experience than me and bring their ideas forward. So Anne and Linda just recently published a paper about what is mathematics knowledge for teaching, because this is a huge debate. It clarifies a conceptual development sequence and contains representations and reasoning. And what we're finding is when we focus on math for teaching, it also supports a strengthening of their content knowledge. They become better at mathematics, but we should start with the math knowledge for teaching, because sometimes when we start with the content, the reciprocal is not true. Just because we work on content doesn't mean their mathematics knowledge for teaching is going to get better. And it could also help support our teachers to have a better relationships with mathematics, because we're now redefining that mathematics isn't about just a procedure and just answers. We're redefining how they look at mathematics, and it helps them feel better about it. So the next part was supposed to be about, what are we doing well? But I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk about what do we still need. And I'm going to look at some people who are experts and need no introductions and what they've said about this. So in 2005, Margaret Sinclair wrote a paper that was submitted here at the Fields Institute, arguing for better and more mathematics preparation for elementary teachers. So you would think something happened from there. Well, 2009, a working group at the Canadian Mathematics Education Forum, Anne Kinder and Dan Jarvis, they created a policy statement arguing for 100 hours of mathematics for teaching preparation. So you'd think now it's going to move forward. Well, in 2012, Names that need no introduction wrote another paper for the Fields Institute. This was when they changed from the 1-year to the 2-year program. And we would hope OCT said, yes, we're going to put this in there. So their recommendation was that teachers need coursework in teaching specific mathematics content knowledge. They also need work in pedagogy knowledge, and they need courses that are both. And they recommended for 72 to 100 hours of this mathematics for teaching and methods courses. So they needed both. Is it a requirement still? No, it's still not a requirement. And OCT just refreshed their policies for teacher education, and still there's no requirement for extra hours in mathematics. So I'm going to revise the topic statement to something that I would agree with, that when mathematics knowledge for teaching is secured, strong and effective pedagogy follows. Thank you.
So I'm going to probably say some things that are fairly similar to what Jennifer said. I would disagree with the statement that when mathematics content knowledge is secured, pedagogy follows. I would qualify that this is not necessarily true. Perhaps math content knowledge is necessary but not sufficient. So that's kind of my claim with this. We know that teachers need a sound understanding of mathematics that they teach. And I should say that I've had experience with working with both elementary and secondary mathematics teachers. So this would hold true of all. However, having this sound understanding does not necessarily mean that effective pedagogy will follow. Teaching mathematics is way more than telling and explaining how to do something. Research has shown that merely telling and explaining does not necessarily develop students' mathematical understanding. Students need to be given particular tasks, particular experiences that will help them engage in mathematical thinking themselves, rather than merely memorize procedures. I remember my colleague Barbara Graves and I ran a math camp for prospective elementary teachers when they came into our program. And it was a research project. And as part of this project, we gave them a bit of a survey at the beginning. And it was hard not to put a math question on. So we did have a math question that asked them, there are different ways that you could multiply a half times a half. What are some ways that you might think about doing that? Well, if you could see panic on a page, that's what we saw. We saw panic, some wrote panic. We encouraged them to write whatever came in their mind. And we saw all sorts of algorithms. 2 halves make a whole. Oh, you must need to cross multiply. I think I need a common denominator. They were reiterating whatever procedure kind of stuck in their head that went along with the word fraction. Scary, isn't it? Because they had only memorized a procedure rather than having developed a deep understanding. However, at the same time, on the same survey, we gave them a recipe for Play-Doh. And the Play-Doh recipe, don't quote me or don't try out this recipe, I'm not remembering it, might have had half a cup of flour, 3/4 of a cup of flour, and we said it's a snow day. We only need to make half the recipe. They all could do that question. So it's interesting where there was no matchup between school mathematics and the procedure and their actual understanding of what it means to take a half. So learning to teach mathematics involves a variety of competencies. It's not just about some set of effective strategies that we have to learn. It involves a deep understanding of mathematics as well as a knowledge of effective pedagogies. But just like knowing mathematics is not a set of procedures, neither is knowing effective pedagogy. Effective pedagogy relies on teachers recognizing what students know and how they know it, what might be the next steps, which activities or tasks might be appropriate to address those next steps, and how to ask questions and provide prompts to be able to see the students' thinking and build on that. This is not easy to do, and it requires a sound understanding of mathematics concepts and the ways that these concepts connect, so that we can connect a new understanding to a particular understanding that the student happens to have. As well, we need an understanding of how students develop mathematical concepts, particularly in the early years when we're just looking at student development of mathematical ideas. A repertoire of various resources and the ability to listen and respond to student thinking appropriately. I once gave a workshop at an international conference for teachers. The title of the workshop was, "What question do I ask next?" Well, I think everybody came because they wanted to know what question to ask next, and that can't be prescribed. The whole purpose of that was about the next question depends on what the student responses were to the question you just asked. So what do prospective teachers need in order in teacher education? Not an easy task and a very short time to be able to do it. Teachers what seems to be effective is to teach mathematics in ways that develop a deep understanding that they will need as they become teachers. This might include modeling sound pedagogies and sometimes through discussion, making explicit what that pedagogy was. But it does involve engaging them in mathematics and combining those two so that one can talk about the mathematics and the pedagogy at the same time. Hence, student can experience mathematics in meaningful ways. And I'm sure you've had the same experience I have when students are engaged in mathematical learning in this way. They say, now I get it. I wish somebody had taught me this in the first place, or this way in the first place. So it's important. It takes time. Whoops. And the lack of time often I find, and you probably, I think this came up in the first debate, when you have a lack of time, I'm reminded of the calculus student who says, okay, I have a test tomorrow. Quick, tell me everything I need to know. And that tends to be what happens when we feel like we don't have enough time. We want to teach, tell, and explain rather than have them develop an understanding. And I think my time's up. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to try and keep it short. I'm going to follow with you also on many points, but maybe push it even further. The first thing I want to say is I think we really have to challenge the idea that anything can be secured and that anything can just follow, right? And while I'm saying this and all that's going to come next, I need to say maybe in a way I'm a fraud because I was not, trained as a mathematician like you would usually think, and I haven't spent years in schools either. I'm kind of a, university creator. So I'm just talking from there. But I know that I was pretty good at doing some, complex enough mathematics back in the days, and I wouldn't be able to do much of that today. So where's the security of that? I've lost it because I didn't practice it. So there is something in the statement and the idea that we can secure something that doesn't sit well with me. And of course, like Chris said, just thinking that things will follow. Maybe for some individual, it will, right? Some people are just great at communicating, at understanding, whatever. But then again, would it means that when they're going to encounter students who just don't get it, who don't understand, who need special help, that they're going to be able to do that just because they're good at math and they're good at communicating math? Maybe not. So there is something there to think about, to challenge the whole idea that something can be secure and that something can come first and something will follow. The other point I want to make is that actually this is a pointless debate because it's not in our hands. We mentioned that earlier, and you mentioned it too. Even if we found the best program that was to be implemented, we know that institutions are not going to do it. There's going to be people who have different ideas, but also all sorts of institutional constraints that comes into play when we want to do these kinds of changes. There's very little that actually we can do to fix those problems and those programs and to implement ways to teach, even if there was one good one. On the other hand, I think that there is something good in both wanting to start with the pedagogy or wanting to start with the math, depending on who you're working with. There could be a pathway for someone who is very comfortable with the math, and the big challenge for that person is to learn the pedagogy and how to teach it. And it goes the other way around too. You might come with someone who's very good at teaching, very motivated, but very struggling with the math. And what we would really need to do is find a way for that person also to get there. And what we would need is those kinds of programs where we just follow people or just pick the people that are going to be good and the best at doing that. But again, this is not possible institutionally. It's not possible from a societal perspective. So we just there's not much, again, that we can do. We can talk, we can have ideas, we can do our best in our local, departments and community, but it's just, again, some kind of local understanding of things. But I would say that approaching prospective teachers with the idea that maybe what comes first is passion, and that passion can be math or it can be the pedagogy, and trying to find ways that we build on that for whatever they are less good with. That would be something to have in mind, maybe personally as an instructor, whatever system you're working with. And I'm going to finish with an old joke from Woody Allen. Probably you know it. So I'm going to try to read it and make it fun. So it goes like this. A guy walks into a psychiatrist office and says, "Hey, doc, my brother's crazy. He thinks he's a chicken." Then the doc says, "Why don't you turn him in?" And the guy says, "I would, but I need the eggs." And then I guess that's how I feel about training teachers program. They're all totally crazy, irrational, and absurd, but we keep going through because we need the eggs.
Thank you very much. Now we have 10 or 12 minutes for the four of you to interact. Shannon, you can go first.
All right, I'll get put on the spot here. So I think talking about mathematical knowledge for teaching, which I think is important, but I consider that like a deeper version of content knowledge, to see many lenses to approach the same concepts through, I think is saying that you have a deeper sense of the mathematics that's going on. And the same idea of seeing connections, like seeing connections between topics in some sense is generalization, right? And generalization is a mathematician skill that we have lots of practice at, and hopefully we can model that to the students and point out places in the curriculum that they're learning where these connections lie. So I think at the end of the day we all agree at the same topic, but that's where I'm seeing this mathematical knowledge of teaching is just deeper content.
Interesting. You want to go ahead?
Well, but I think you get that through integration of content and pedagogy. And when I say content, I mean the math content knowledge. So in other words, students come in with my example of the fraction. They come in with a very fragile understanding of some ideas, and it's not just elementary teachers. It can sometimes be secondary too, because they learned what they needed to learn to pass the test, to go on and to keep on going. And when you go outside of that, they can get a bit nervous. I know quite often when I do a workshop for elementary teachers, I find quite often they'll dive into the question, whereas secondary teachers sometimes are not too sure. So they want to try it themselves first before they expose themselves. So I think that we all have a bit of a fragile understanding when teachers come in. So that integration of looking at modeling the kind of pedagogy that would engage people and start for our own teacher candidates to understand the connections between ideas allows them to see why they might want to use a similar pedagogy with their students, because teachers teach the way that they were taught. And we need to break that mold a little bit when they come into a teacher education program and give them different learning experiences of mathematics, so that they can see the benefit of learning mathematics in a variety of different ways. So
I love that way of putting it, the idea that I learned it this way, so that must be the best for everybody else, and breaking that piece is really important. And I loved your example of the elementary teachers. So I did a training with elementary and secondary teachers together, and I gave a problem, and I was very young in my career, so I didn't solve the problem first myself. I just put it on the board and thought, I want to see what happens. And the secondary teachers immediately went to a formula. They were writing it out, and the elementary teachers just shut down because they couldn't remember the formula. But they had been trying to reason with it. Turns out they were misapplying the formula to the problem, but they were so stuck on the formula. The elementary teachers were actually on the right path, and if they had not felt unconfident in their abilities, would have gotten the correct answer, whereas the secondary teachers were never going to get the correct answer with the path they were on. So it was a really interesting conversation to have around sometimes the formula, jumping to that isn't really helpful. And these were very experienced teachers who were in this room, so very strong pedagogists, but then their math knowledge were at different levels, but the type of knowledge. So I think I love the idea of focusing on both, but it's hard to learn about pedagogy when you're still struggling to multiply, or you're still struggling to, but I don't agree that we need to put them in more math courses, which are going to reinforce a belief that math is a certain way. And the debate this morning, I loved hearing that debate this morning about service courses and how to teach those in a way to help. And I think there is a middle ground, but we're not there yet. We're still stuck on the language and the way to do it. And I'd love to find that middle ground.
The one point I'd like to make about this is still to challenge the idea of integration. Not to go completely against it, but I think there's also value in going separate ways sometimes, because if we focus too much on teaching them the math that they're going to teach, or teaching them what they're going to use, what they need to know. It was very nice, you know, all the pictures you showed us there, and of course we want all that to be part of their experiences, but it cannot just be that. I think it's important also that they experience mathematics outside of that box, so that they can also eventually create something new, something different. They can go further from that and not just kind of reproduce and replicate these things. And but that also goes in hand with your statement, Shannon, about fully understanding something, because this is also something I would like to challenge. I don't think it's possible, you know, to fully understand anything. And you learn a bit, you go and you come back, and like even when in what you were saying, Chris, those experience of, oh, I get it now, but it's not just because, you know, I'm explaining it better. It's because time came, I had different experiences, I understand things in different light, and there's no one path for all this. It's gonna have to be a mix anyways, and people are gonna have different experiences and different kind of haha moment at different times, and coming from the math or coming from the pedagogy. And sometimes going outside is going to make you look back at what you're going to do in class and say, oh, now I get it because I did this and that, and vice versa, right? Seeing multiplication in that way might help you better understand what's happening with matrix dot product or whatever. So
I'm going to say something slightly controversial. Do I have time? Yeah. I think that taking the focus off doing the content first, because mathematicians don't approach it in a way that's conducive to for teachers, I think is taking a little bit off of what you guys should be pushing mathematicians to do, which is change their teaching style to the best methods possible. And that's not a content or a pedagogy thing for teachers. It's a how the best to teach the content thing. So it's really changing the mathematician's viewpoint on how to teach these courses. And I think that's an important thing too, for even for people who aren't going on in the teaching. They should be taught in the best way possible with the best methods for learning.
Well, I'm going to make a comment because I feel bad for some of my mathematicians, because I sort of agree with you, but it's hard to teach the way I teach in a class with 200 students. So we have to change that first. And, you know, the idea that the system needs to change if we're going to, because, yeah, I think that's a problem, because I do agree that would be lovely and that would be wonderful. But I will also acknowledge that, you know, when they tell me I'm going to have 55 in my class, my heart stops. I can't imagine having 200 in my class and still be able to do what I do.
But also we need to be thinking about how are we teaching elementary mathematics and how are we teaching secondary mathematics. So they don't just learn mathematics in university courses. So a lot of the mathematics that's being taught by the people we they've already learned, but they've learned it and quite often in very narrow ways because, you know, there's time and I only need to teach this because they only need this for grade 10 and all of the constraints that we have. So, I mean, if we could overhaul the whole system, then we wouldn't have it. They wouldn't be coming to us with a half times a half. Oh, I must need a common denominator, right? It's the way in which they were taught. The other thing I wanted to pick up on is there's tons of evidence that teachers continue to learn mathematics through their own teaching. And so as they are teaching and learning new content and thinking about how do they approach this or how do they set this up for their students, they continue to learn mathematics and as they listen to other ways. And I think that one thing we need to do in teacher education programs is make sure that we open up the space so that starts there. And that once they start to feel open to new ways of thinking about mathematics, that can continue throughout their teaching, as well as appropriate, you know, professional development, et cetera. The other thing I thought about when you were talking about, well, they need math courses and they need, you know, the integration of, is we might be talking about programs that are 4 years versus 2 years or et cetera, et cetera. So if we had a program that is their entire bachelor degree, where they're 4 years to learn to become a teacher, there might be enough time to have that variety of courses. In places where there's a 2-year program, they already have a degree in something, and we don't have much space to do all of that.
Yeah, and maybe one way to rephrase it is to say that I think there's value in doing that as well, right? And to I mean, even in the first debate this morning, there's a strong tendency to think in terms of usefulness, right? The math that they're going to need, the math that they're going to use, the math that makes sense in the work that they're learning or their programs or the job that they're going to do. But I think there's also potential and interest for something more than that, not just what they need, what they used to. A lot of math that we learn in school, it serves nothing to most people, but it's a culture. It's something that, you know, creates the way that you think, the way that you look at things. It's a cultural product. It's like going to the museum. That's also useless, but we still want to do it. So there's also value in that, and I think it's interesting to keep that in mind.
Thank you.